we're going to get started. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Annalicia. So once again, my name is Prasant Mohapatra, serve as the Vice Chancellor for Research. As you all know, we started this Team Science Forum while morphing from the COVID-19 forum. So this has been one of the most popular forum at UC Davis. A lot of participants join in every Friday. And, I heard someone comment that Friday morning, 10:30 a.m. If you cancel this, I don't know what to do then. So that's a strong endorsement of our effort. So as we have been doing, we have been expanding the scope of this forum to bring in new opportunities in front of you. So today we are, we'll do something that we haven't done in the last 2 years to explore our relationship with lab, and specifically we will be focusing on LBNL partnership today, and in future also we will expand it to all the 3 labs that are associated with the UC system, and maybe with ANR at some point of time. So with that, I have a distinct pleasure of introducing Carol Burns, who is the Deputy Director for Research and the Chief Research Officer for Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. So Carol was recently appointed as Deputy Director of the lab, and she joins the lab with very deep experience in the DOE National Lab system. And some of you may have worked, I just saw Mani on the screen. Mani has worked with Carol in the past. So she brings along, hi Mani. So she brings more than 25 years of scientific leadership experience in national lab setting. And again, I can go on and on, but I'll have Carol talk more about her past experiences. But here the goal, again, I just want to emphasize the goal before handing it over is, let's try to explore opportunities on how we at UC Davis work in collaboration with LBNL, and it can go beyond research sometimes, but here we are focusing about research. There are, at least I know some of my colleagues in engineering who have been working with LBNL, and they have been delighted and very satisfied with the collaborations. We also, likewise, we want also, this is for Carol, that we want people from the lab side, to visit us, in the post-COVID world and interact more with us as we go forward. And again, for the UC Davis folks, if anything needs to be facilitated for these collaborations with LBNL or any of the other 2 labs, my office will be delighted to help you navigate through the process. With that, I will hand it over to Carol. Thanks, Carol, for joining us today.
Thank you, Prasant. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really delighted to be able to participate in the research forum. Before I get started, I want to take the opportunity to introduce Bill Johansen. Bill, do you want to pop on camera for a minute and give it a wave? Yeah, unmute, but also camera on. And say hi. Bill works in my office, and he certainly coordinates a lot of our university interaction and pipeline programs. He's a great resource, works closely with Davis and with Prasant's office. And so most often we encourage direct scientist to scientist interaction, but he can be a good resource for helping to identify those touch points. So I just wanted you all to meet Bill. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start my slides, and I was assured that everybody sees the right thing, correct? Because I no longer see you all, so I'm going to have to rely, if there's a question that pops up that I should answer, somebody's going to have to flag me, because I don't have 2 screens here right now. So
we're not seeing your slides, Carol.
You're not seeing the slides. Interesting. Okay, let me stop and do this. And this, I thought if I could do it backwards.
Now we
do this. Now, is that better?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Ah, perfect. Okay. All right. So as Prasant indicates, I'm relatively new in the role as Deputy Lab Director at Berkeley Laboratory. I've been here about 6 months now. but I spent about 34 years at Los Alamos National Laboratory before that, so I'm pretty familiar with the lab system. But I'm still overwhelmed by the spectrum of science here at Berkeley Laboratory. I'm going to highlight a few interesting things about our laboratory, and then if there's any really hard questions, I may ask Bill to chime in as well. So first off, what is a national laboratory? Most of you probably know, but I just wanted to put up, this was the original Paul Alivisatos, what we call the rainbow diagram, that talks about all 17 of the Department of Energy's national laboratories. 16 of those are what we call government-owned, contractor-operated laboratories, which means we are actually employees, not of the government, we're employees of the University of California. And most of our sibling laboratories similarly have organizations who actually hire them and then manage the laboratory on behalf of the government. These laboratories are a pretty broad array of science and technology. Some of them are more mission-oriented laboratories with an applied mission focus. Some of them are science laboratories. Some of them are more funded by one office within the Office of Science, and some are what we call multi-purpose or multi-program. And so this, you can see Berkeley is a science laboratory, but a multi-purpose science laboratory. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. What we like to say is that Lawrence Berkeley Lab could be considered one of the birthplaces of team science. This is a photograph from, I think, 1938, where E.O. Lawrence had put together a strong team of scientists in about 1931 to ensure that it's where he invented the cyclotron. And in doing so, he created not just a Nobel Prize winning scientific tool, but he also invented team science and putting together groups of people together. Let's see, I'm getting distracted by chat, so I'm going to keep going from that. Now, the other thing it's useful to know, though, is that Berkeley Laboratory is not just the birthplace of team science, but it's team science often that's driven by a purpose. We are also home to Art Rosenfeld, who was known as the father of energy efficiency, but I'll get into that in a minute. So this is a director that I steal, a slide that I steal from our director, Mike Witherell, that talks about what the nation needs from Berkeley Laboratory in particular. The Department of Energy laboratories are fundamentally there to create scientific solutions to address national priorities. There are mission areas within the department. We have to have absolute depth in important areas of discovery science in order to be able to faithfully execute that purpose. So therefore, we are often on the cutting edge of science disciplines that are unique to each laboratory. The laboratories are also stewards of very particular capabilities and scientific tools. These are our national user facilities, and I'll say more about that in a bit, as well as creating and operating often for the benefit of broader science communities, unique and advanced instrumentation or computational capabilities. And so we become scientific resources, which means we have to be part of this broader science community. We're home to manage large research teams, that's our version of team science. And I like this one in particular. Often we become the place to advance important technologies with long, risky R&D paths, things that are not going to be commercializable right away, decadal scale enterprises. And most importantly, something that's very important to my office is that we have to ensure that we have a diverse group of highly trained, creative individuals committed to working together. What that means is our people are our greatest asset. We're kind of standing waves of scientists as laboratories, and so that's very important to us. We are home, as I said, to incredible discovery science. This is a couple of examples. We now have had, I think, 14 Nobel Prizes awarded to Berkeley Lab researchers. Most recently to Jennifer Doudna, who's a joint faculty for us, who was a Nobel Prize winner in chemistry in 2020, and the first woman Berkeley Lab faculty scientist to win a Nobel Prize. But this is a pretty long and rich history of discovery science. Similarly, in areas of important scientific solutions, one can sort of say that the National Medal of Science and Technology are the equivalents. And these are just a couple of examples in history of comparable levels of stature. I mentioned Art Rosenfeld, the godfather of energy efficiency. He was a high energy physicist who was deeply committed to effectively addressing our energy challenges, not through exploitation of new energy sources, but through recognition of the energy that we already had and improvements in energy efficiency. He later was a member of the California Energy Commission and really was the architect of much of California's energy approach as we see it now. Paul Alivisatos, who just left the University of California, is now president at University of Chicago, was a winner of the National Medal of Science for his pioneering work in nanoscience. That's another example of a science area that has burgeoned into technology in a whole host of applications, everything from materials to energy harvesting. I mentioned user facilities. The Office of Science and associated laboratories are home to a whole host of user facilities. As an enterprise, 28 scientific user facilities across the complex hosted a total of 36,000 plus users. I think at Berkeley Lab, that number is around 12 to 14,000, something like that on an annual basis. They fall within these categories. These informally form clusters of laboratories that have common identity, common purpose, common engagement, and create part of our DOE scientific network. Berkeley Laboratory has a number of these facilities. ESNet is a little different. I'll talk about our scientific user facilities, but if you look at the remaining 4 of the scientific user facilities, the Advanced Light Source, which is a light source facility, Molecular Foundry, which is one of the nanoscale science and research centers, the Joint Genome Institute, and NERSC as a supercomputing capability, we have a lot of engagement with the University of California system. These are just some of the numbers. I think these are from 2019 about how well utilized these capabilities are in our engagement within our own UC system scientific community. So a lot of our scientific breakthroughs take advantage of our scientific user facilities. So starting at the top left, that's the Advanced Light Source. The ALS provides bright X-ray beams and leading instruments for a whole range of different science and technology applications. There's currently a major upgrade being embarked upon for ALS, referred to as the ALSU project. That's going to create pretty unprecedented capability in an X-ray facility. And you can see for each one of those the number of users that they have. Next, I will go to the top right, is the Molecular Foundry. The Molecular Foundry is one of these interesting constructs, the Nanoscale Science and Research Centers, which houses expertise and instruments for nanoscale science, where users can come in and get assistance, access specialized capabilities, and get help in developing their own science interests. I will go to next JGI, which is in the middle. Joint Genome Institute really brings integrative and collaborative genome science to researchers working in an ever-growing set of biological problems. I can look out my window and see a wonderful new facility that houses JGI, our integrative genomics building. And this is a picture of the Secretary of Energy when she visited last year with Jennifer Doudna and Nigel Mounsey, who's the director of the JGI. And not to leave out high performance computing, NERSC there at the lower left. NERSC provides top tier computing to all of the programs in the Office of Science for simulation, for data analysis, and for machine learning applications. We recently dedicated our latest iteration of hardware and high performance computing, which we dedicated to Saul Perlmutter, who helped develop some of the applications taking advantage of high performance computing. And finally, ESNet there at the bottom right is a pretty unique capability. Think of it as the internet circulatory system for the entire DOE research enterprise. It is a network and capability that knits together sites really around the world, not just around the country. We have an ongoing project there, ESNet 6, which will transform the capacity and capability of that particular network. This is overall budget picture of the laboratory. These are some facts and figures at a glance. You can see that we have major parts of our portfolio that come from the major portions of the Office of Science, BES, BER, the Advanced Scientific Computing Research area, nuclear physics plus high energy physics together. We also have a fairly significant slice of ERE work that is an enduring legacy of Art Rosenfeld and his engagement at the laboratory. And then we do a whole host of work for other entities. What's unique to me about Berkeley Laboratory is the pretty large slice of what we call strategic partnership projects, many of which reflect productive partnerships with private sector. But you can see the facts and figures for the staff, the graduate students, undergraduates, postdocs, and visiting scientists and engineer. It's a very intellectually vital place, even as we are operating in a hybrid environment at this point in time. These are our enduring strategic priorities for the laboratory. So think of these, and it's probably no coincidence, it's quite deliberate that these map onto the major portions of the Office of Science. So chemistry and materials science, including the light source, is up at the top left. That reflects our work with basic energy sciences. Bottom right, new capabilities in biological and environmental science. That work is with BER. Discovery science and fundamental physics is HEP and NP, and computing sciences enabling scientific discovery is advanced scientific computing. But just as important as as the science areas is our program of infrastructure renewal for our site, as well as our people. And we put that front and center because our people are our most important asset. So we really emphasize carefully the selection, the recruiting, the development and nurturing of scientific careers here. Scientifically, this office has a significant role in helping to support our community, science community, in shaping research directions. These are cultivated in cross-area discussions. They are informed by our scientists who are aware of the most current direction in science and technology. It helps us think ahead 5 to 10 years to be prepared for the science complex of the future. What do we need to be prepared to do? What capabilities do we need to sustain and to grow in order to meet those national level challenges? We use discretionary research for that in the form of LDRD, but we use a lot of other assets too, whether they're our pipeline programs, our communications channels, our facilities, our IT infrastructure. All of those are strategic assets that we use in coordination to realize this benefit. So we have successfully grown new capabilities. We've developed leaders for the future. We have prepared ourselves to undertake major new scientific enterprises in terms of facilities, projects, or instruments. And we find a way to integrate across programs. I'm going to show a couple of examples from the selection on the right of how we go about deliberately growing and nurturing capabilities. So here's an example, AI for science. That was a topic that I think we probably didn't have on the radar screen 10 years ago, but it was launched as a lab-wide initiative. The first thing that happened is we'll often come together in town halls and interest areas to try and engage scientists from across areas and across disciplines to understand what the needs are. So there was a series of AI for Science town halls where we partnered in, and very often in these, we partnered with outside entities, including other laboratories. We saw tremendous response to the particular, as we all have seen in the area of AI and machine learning. It's just exploded in terms of significance across all disciplines. So that gave rise to a number of other vehicles, whether it is we need to engage with pipeline populations. So NERSC started a very popular series of summer schools on machine learning and deep learning. We have conferences that help bring together domain experts with subject matter experts in data science. We may invest in the actual conscious cultivation of capability, like the LDRD initiative. The result is that we end up with enduring programs such as our terribly successful cross-office camera center that Jamie Sethian leads, that helps to bring this kind of science tools across the areas of interest for our laboratory and for our partners more broadly. Another example we're all familiar with is quantum information science and technology. Quantum started here with LDRD projects seeding our own interests in the area about in 2015, 2016. Dialogue within the community ultimately led to opportunities through the Office of Science for which we felt like we were pretty well positioned. We have tremendous scientific leadership. And as a consequence, we were reasonably successful in those initiatives, ultimately resulting in the award of the Quantum Systems Accelerator, which is one of the quantum hubs that the Department of Energy has awarded, led by Irfan Siddiqui here. We also have more recently been awarded a quantum network testbed project, and we think we're going well on our way to be part of a vital community creating the quantum enterprise of the future. There are examples in next generation microelectronics. This was actually started, there was a series of multi-laboratory discussions a few years back called the Big Ideas Summit. And the idea we wanted to create beyond CMOS alternatives, taking advantage of advanced architectures to try and create radically more energy efficient computational capabilities took root. And there's activities there. One of our more recent sort of initiatives you saw on that slide was our interest in energy storage. We've created a sort of an overarching energy storage center led by Dr. Noel Bakhtian, you see up there at the top right, that has very strong Berkeley components founded on, and this is not just electrochemical energy storage. We're talking expertise in thermal energy storage, chemical energy storage, electrochemical, mechanical, all brought to the grand challenge problem of how do we try and support next generation energy systems with energy storage. That actually served as the basis for one of the energy earthshots that the Department of Energy has now released, that creates large opportunities regionally and nationally in long duration energy storage. It takes advantage of a lot of core capabilities. It also takes a lot of advantage of a lot of external connections we have within the state of California and more broadly. So we're pretty excited about that. Another example that you may be familiar with is the National Alliance for Water Innovation. This is the flagship of the water energy activity at the Department of Energy. We're leading NAWI along with co-founding laboratories Oak Ridge and the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Colorado. The vision really here is to secure a resilient 21st century water supply through what we characterize as a circular water economy, with an emphasis on recovery reuse through desalination of water resources, which is not limited to just desalination in a traditional seawater sense, but really permits water reuse from a variety of produced water and off-spec water systems, including subsurface brines. So Peter Fisk is the director, brings together a whole host of stakeholders, which include private sector enterprises. We have many affiliates of NAWI that help us create roadmaps and help us achieve that full value pipeline you see there in the middle in the advancement and demonstration of and implementation of technologies. Let's see. Biomanufacturing in the circular bioeconomy is another one. We have long been home to enterprises such as JBay, the Joint Bioenergy Institute. These have translated into our more technology-related instantiations of these, including multi-laboratory platforms like the Agile BioFoundry, as well as the Advanced Biofuels and Bioproducts Process Development Unit you see there on the right-hand side, which serves as test beds and enabling facilities for DOE, for the bioenergy research centers more broadly, and of course to private sector as well. So some pretty interesting business mechanisms that are inherent in this. Accompanying that is a fair interest in the innovation of how you actually achieve tech commercialization and technology translation. Berkeley Lab was home to the first of what is now a spate of kind of entrepreneurial incubators at the national laboratories. Ours is Cyclotron Road. There are now centers springing up in different places. This is a place where new entrepreneurs who want to be in more equipment heavy areas where they can't just say develop an app in their basement, they need access to equipment and capabilities, can come and benefit from some on-site facilities and mentorship from laboratory scientists. We also have a whole host of other sorts of capabilities that are of benefit and that's what I think gives rise to our strong connections with private sector. So I mentioned workforce. I have to say, and I take no credit for this being relatively new to the laboratory, but having been engaged in pipeline diversity efforts for a good portion of my career, I have to say, my perception is Berkeley Lab takes this more seriously than any other place I've ever seen. This is a deeply felt ideal in the DNA of the laboratory employees. It is accompanied by a very deliberate and coordinated set of mechanisms used to help develop scientists and engineers, including those that may come from disadvantaged or unrepresented backgrounds. It is part of an overall envelope that is the culture of Berkeley Laboratory. We have what we call stewardship values. And this concept of inclusion, diversity, equity, and accountability, most importantly, is part of one of those stewardship values that we maintain. You can see the wheel up at the top left there. This resonates pretty deeply with me personally, and I think it's part of what makes this laboratory a pretty special place to work. We are certainly building the Berkeley Lab of the future. I won't dwell on this too much. Suffice to say that we are in a mode of recapitalization. This is a long, slow process, but certainly I can look out my window and see the next building beyond the integrative genomics building popping up. That will be our what we call the Biological and Environmental Programs Integration Center, BioEpic. That's going to be another facility. We are looking to try and upgrade our infrastructure in terms of our utility systems, looking ever to be a more sustainable lab in the process. And I think we have a lot to look forward to here. We also, I would say, an important role that we embrace is being part of the University of California system. We are one of 3 UCL affiliated laboratories. We are the sole remaining laboratory that is solely a University of California lab. And that it gives us a sort of a tremendous enabling advantage in that it gives us the ability to work more seamlessly with the campuses in many respects and be truly part of a more integrated academic system. I don't disagree with this characterization that we feel like we may be the most productive integration of a national lab with a major research university. I've made some study of this from my time at another laboratory, and I'm well aware of strong partnerships in Chicago and strong partnerships in the state of Tennessee, but nothing quite matches these numbers, I think. We have faculty appointments with campuses that are either joint or shared. We can talk a little bit about some of the details of that. And as you might expect, given that we're a shuttle right away from Berkeley, Berkeley probably tops those numbers. But Davis has a lot at stake here, a lot of interest. And so that's why you're an important partner for us. And in fact, I wanted to take this particular opportunity to congratulate Professor Ronald for her as being a recipient of a 2022 Wolf Prize. Professor Ronald also serves as the director of the grass genetics focus area at JBEG. So we see that this is how we are supporting tremendous scientific talent in the state and through these kinds of partnerships. And in fact, there are other technical areas that we, for which we, I think, have strong partnerships. You know, it's important to recognize that the National Laboratory, we're not an extramural funding agency. We're not NSF. What we see as productive ways to engage is where we truly all have our own unique resources that we bring to collaborations. And this results in success for our enterprise. I went and had lunch one day, a couple weeks ago, with Barbara Yatsik and talked about this multi-research program. I forget what MRPI stands for, I apologize. But the very interesting effort regarding the electron ion collider, where we have now been awarded one of these 4-year MRPIs to develop a California consortium to bring ideas for core science and experimental capabilities to the EIC. It's a really unique opportunity for some of our for students to get involved in things like detector development, including the pixelated silicon detectors and other sorts of opportunities. This is a pretty broad partnership, as you see there. I spent some time last night reading about hyperfacets because I wasn't actually all that familiar with the project, but this is really interesting. It was born out of an understanding that there's lots of climate data. We're going to be drowning in climate data. How do we make that actionable? How do we work with those who might be consumers of climate data, whether they are water managers, whether they are those who are planning for state infrastructure, to really make sure that we clearly articulate the value of kinds of data, and we understand the limitations of data, whether it is regional or whether it's because of uncertainties in data, and develop modeling and data articulation frameworks in a regional context. Hyperfacets now, I think, covers the whole continental United States. That is in providing actionable information associated with this. And so we've partnered on those kinds of activities. I'm gonna embarrass somebody here for a minute and just flash up Sean Piscer's face by way of saying another example. I had a fascinating discussion with Sean yesterday about his work and about the kinds of value that we see in engagement between Davis and Berkeley Lab. And in fact, if you look at it at a higher level, we have a lot of partnerships with many of the UC campuses. I had a version of the slides where I would say together, collectively, these enterprises, we bringing our own unique resources, have brought $160 million to our collective enterprise across the UC system that's totaled over a 5-year period. So we're very powerful when we can work together. Another example of an important partnership here. Berkeley Lab has been home for some time to an aspect of the National Microbiome Data Collective because of our JGI facility. We teamed overtly with UC Davis and UCSF in the creation of the tri-institutional partnership. I think it's TRIP Microbiome, which is designed to help seed interdisciplinary science. And UC Davis, and bring together experimental and computational predictive capabilities. And UC Davis, I think, is part of each one of the 5 first awards that were made through that program. We do have a number of joint and shared faculty sort of appointments as one way that we encourage interaction between our respective sites. That's certainly not the only way. Very often we just engage in constructive research partnerships where we work together, and we can also bring in students and undergraduate and graduate as well as postdocs. Let me just go ahead and skip to this slide through a whole host of different mechanisms. This is just a few examples of programs that help us integrate the workforce of the future into our site, into our laboratory. There you can go to the internship site and get a lot more information about those engagement mechanisms. So let's see. I'm trying to get to the end. Just suffice to say, I think we already have a very strong partnership with Davis. I think it is an expansion of how we have viewed Berkeley as a center of team science in the past, to understand that we would work within the system in team science. And I'm looking forward to our continued engagement. So with that, I think I'm going to go out of mode so I can see everybody again. And I'd be happy to answer questions. I'm going to look quickly in the chat. There's good, Bill. You've been, and Annalicia have been adding some resources there.
If you have a question for Carol, we're inviting you to use the raised hand feature, and then we can call on you to ask your question.
Go ahead, Manny.
Hi, Carol.
Hi.
One of the things that faculty at UC Davis would be interested in is achieving some sort of adjunct status at the lab, so we can, compete for LDRD funds in collaboration with lab scientists.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a mechanism for that?
Bill, do you want to talk about the various faculty status positions we have?
Sure. No, thanks, Manny. That's definitely a question that Annalicia and Whitney and I and others have talked about. There definitely are several mechanisms. The first part we always say is finding those connections to the research teams at the lab. That's the best way to kind of drive those relationships, and then the appointment can grow from that. We have, but I'd say there's one that we hear a lot about, which is what we call our joint faculty. And that's when it's a jointly recruited 50-50 split between campus and the lab. I put that first because that's what everybody kind of tends to, but I don't want that to be a barrier to anybody. We actually have what we call our shared faculty. And that can be everything from, you have a faculty scientist appointment with us and may have projects with us, but have, no salary taken from the grants here, to one where you have summer salary here, and there's ones, we have some shared that take both summer salary and some academic year salary from us. So there's definitely a lot of opportunities for that, but the key is finding the engagement with the research areas and research divisions of the projects.
Yeah, let me just say a little bit philosophically is, LDRD at the laboratories is about building capability. We want to ensure that we are going to have an enduring relationship, so that faculty member becomes part of the capability that the lab has to bring to bear. I've resisted in general in the past using LDRD as sort of an extramural support area. So we want to establish those firm interactions in long-term engagement. But that certainly, we can do that through the channels that Bill talked about.
We have an MOU in place with LBNL and UC Davis, which is about a decade old now.
Mm-hmm.
It needs new energy infusion into it.
Yeah. Well, I think we have an opportunity, don't we?
Thank you.
Let's talk more about that. Thanks.
Angela?
Yes, thank you, Carol, for the very nice overview. I really enjoyed it. And I just had some thoughts along the way. I'm Angela Haskell. I'm Associate Dean for Translational Research in the School of Medicine at UC Davis. And you did emphasize about initiatives in climate change and health, and also in projects related to the microbiome. I think these are initiatives that we are directly interested in. And along with Mani's comment, I think this is a very ripe time for stepping up a little bit more intimate relationships between UC Davis Health and LBL. And I was wondering if you had anything planned in strategic initiatives or anything already in place that we could build on, or we should come up with some new ideas and work out some feasible ways for collaboration. I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Part of the reason we had a strategic retreat for our ALDs last fall, and one of the opportunities is also a challenge in this time period, which is the landscape at the federal level is moving so fast. You may have heard there was a DOE town hall Wednesday that announced a reorganization within the science and energy side of the Department of Energy writ large. The Department of Energy is going to be the recipient of tens of billions of dollars investment intended largely for deployment of clean energy technologies. We're all grappling with figuring out, in that kind of a landscape, what is the role of a national laboratory, as well as what is the role of regional science and technology ecosystems. So, Prasant has been involved in discussions at the UC COVCR level about what kind of opportunities can we respond to. It's interesting, the infrastructure legislation that has already passed, I think resources a couple of those first big earth shots. So we're all grappling with what does it mean to have a hydrogen hub heavily focused on deployment, which will have, job training and workforce development and, infrastructure aspects to it. There's also some discussion of carbon, right? Carbon negative. How are we going to really address the challenge of not just reducing carbon emissions, but actually going carbon negative, as cited in Academy reports? And that becomes even more challenging as there are approaches that are less well technically developed and approaches that I think people would view as the best solutions, like advanced weatherization, sequestration, biologically mediated or terrestrially mediated carbon sinks. There are also things like carbon circular economy, which are probably nearer term in terms of their capacity to tip the needle, but sometimes suffer from maybe less support as being less permanent removal. And so we're trying to figure out and navigate what are the right approaches here. So in the short term, we are talking at the VCR level about how we try and engage California ecosystem. We had a pretty interesting discussion at the California Council of Science and Technology Leadership Roundtable this week. I think that another thing that we need to do is reach out through our existing collaborations and see if we can then mobilize more specific scientific engagement, whether it's workshops, whether it's fora to try and get people engaged. There are some lab to lab kind of conversations that we're becoming aware of. We're getting quickly invited to various workshops that are being mounted on relevant topics. We need to understand how to bring our partners along in those kinds of vehicles. So I think, while we're having levels kind of discussions at the VCR level, we also need to reach out with the partnerships we have and say, all right, let's talk about how we can plug pieces in as appropriate as the opportunities unfold, because it's going to come fast.
Yes, I think it is the best approach, both the top down and the bottom up.
Yeah.
And actually, this forum that we have with Prasant's office and the School of Medicine developed on these Friday mornings is one of a great examples, and I think we could also utilize it to step up our collaboration a little bit more. So
that's an
perhaps
interesting
we
idea.
could invite more investigators from your lab. So thank you very much. We do have actually a very active sustainability program as well, and I'm not sure if they already collaborate with LBNL, but I can look into this, and I'm
I
looking
don't
forward
actually
to.
know. We can ask our sustainability office. I don't doubt that there's ties in some of our energy technology areas.
So one thing I will add real quick, I'm going to put in the chat a link to a website at the lab that has what we call our annual lab plan, which is our report to the Office of Science. And so you can see the one we gave in 21 and some previous years. Also, there's links to each of our research areas, their strategic plans. Just to kind of a very rough, not precise equivalency for our structure, we have areas similar to the colleges on a campus, and we have divisions which are similar to probably departments. And so with that, we have that same kind of structure. But you can look at that. I mean, some of what Carol was talking about and what we're planning for now and in the future is hinted at in some of that. But you know, we're in the middle of doing some more preparing our actual annual lab plan for 22.
We're trying to build the airplane and fly it at the same time, right, Bill?
Exactly.
Way to go.
Thank you. Jeremy?
Thank you. I guess I have a question about what exactly you're envisioning for the interaction with UC Davis, right? Because we clearly follow very different funding models.
Yeah.
So what I've understood from what you've described, you know, the LDRD is a vehicle to really explore new areas, and I'm in complete agreement with that.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like the real strength of LBNL or the other national labs is that you can pursue much bigger projects, right? Much bigger problems than we can.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that it's not necessarily bigger projects than Davis can, but we can be partners on those bigger projects in many instances. That was some of the examples I tried to.
Well, it feels kind of like a sense of vision, right? Because my experience of being at UC Davis, yes, the university as a whole could pursue very large things, but there's all these faculties and we all have our individual research priorities and individual research ideas. And so there's a lot of these single PI or multiple PI grants.
Mm-hmm.
The things that you're talking about are much larger. And the difficulty I've had in engaging with the labs in the past is that I have some of these ideas and I'm approaching the lab and it's not a great fit because the scale just isn't right. And I'd really like to approach this from the other direction. I'd really like to say, what kinds of projects are you interested in pursuing at the lab? How can I contribute to that?
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, that seems to be kind of the mechanism that you had in mind with these adjunct faculty appointments. And I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, and I won't say, this is kind of a big question for all the laboratories, how to try and best create these scientific ecosystems. It's true even within individual laboratories, by the way, right? Big mission problem. I think I have an idea that might make sense there. How do I engage, right? So I won't say that we have everything all figured out. What I will say is, you know, everybody has to have some sense of what are the strategic assets I bring to the table. I have, you know, smart people in the following capabilities. You know, Berkeley Lab doesn't have science in all areas. We are, even within the Department of Energy, all of those labs on that rainbow spectrum are a little different, right? That's as they should be. We've had commissions that were congressionally designated to look at the labs and say if we're too redundant, and they say no, everybody has their own character and their own uniqueness. We all have facilities, which could be big facilities, like a user facility. It could be, I have a unique kind set of tools that I use to measure these kind of geophysical properties or these kind of, you know, those are all important understanding things, the aspects of the understanding that we have. One thing that may be different now that I don't know that we're taking good enough advantage of is the fact that we don't have to travel to do this kind of stuff. You know, I was sitting in my house last night and I said, I'm giving a talk tomorrow. And my husband said, where? And I said, well, at Davis, but from my office. So it doesn't, none of that means anything anymore. You know, I still believe in the value of in-person engagement. And so, you know, I'm struggling with that, but I will say we have the opportunity maybe to do more things, like we created the UC Wildfire Symposium. You know, I give a lot of credit to UCOP for having constructed a vehicle in which we can talk about a big problem set and who's doing work in what kinds of areas. But it's got to be paired with follow-on. It's got to be, and follow-on could be small-scale collaboration. you know, as I talk with some of our staff, whether they are joint and shared faculty or not, they say very often, you know, I see a good opportunity in a project to reach out and get a faculty member and a couple of students involved, because that gives me, you know, the right way to explore some work with when they have some unique assets and perspectives to bring to bear. It doesn't have to be just big projects. But certainly we need to be able to identify where we see a density of states in terms of capabilities and excitement and enthusiasm around a problem. And that's maybe what Prasant and I need to talk about, figuring out how to nucleate. I'm going to be talking with Kathy Ellick on the Berkeley campus. None of this can be top down. I mean, it just doesn't work. I've tried to do things where there's a handshake at a high level from a lab to a university. Let's go work together in this area. And unless you're really building those PI to PI relationships, it doesn't really work. So you need engagement across the board. So I'm going to see if we can figure out how do we take advantage of these vehicles to try and build research communities, hopefully understanding that there's opportunities that we're going after, but sometimes it's just, we may not be entirely sure because the opportunities are going to come fast enough that if we wait until the FOA is released, it's too late.
No, and I agree completely, right? The way that the most substantial collaborations I've had in the past have developed was I just happened to be in a room and overheard a conversation and said, that sounds like an interesting thing. I'm going to sit down and talk to you about that. And then it develops over a period of months. And so I'd really like to have that. I'd really like to be a fly on the wall at some of the conversations that are going down there at LBNL. And I can do that now that we have this remote vehicle. And I just don't even know where to get engaged. I don't know where to start.
So I just wanted to comment that we do have a core group. So Bill and a few people from Office of Research here at UC Davis meet regularly to update each other on what's going on both our institutions and identify events or funding opportunities or other things that we can do to provide those contact opportunities. And we did run a series of very successful workshops and one-on-one brainstormings over the last couple of years. And we are happy to do more of those activities. But rather than us deciding what we're going to do, we definitely want to hear from faculty around the topics they want to connect for. Or if you're looking at a particular funding opportunity, or you're interested in connecting to a particular directorate, a particular department or group at UC Davis, we are here to help you. So feel free to contact me, or Whitney can put her email. Whitney's at the Office of Research here at UC Davis too, or Bill at the lab. So there is a core group of staff that are here to help you make those connections. And definitely we are interested in assisting you in figuring out what else we can do. Maybe it's a recurring seminar series or a coffee hour with a predetermined agenda or not. Sometimes having an unstructured conversation just around what's going on can be helpful too. And we're happy to hear from anyone, both at the lab or at UC Davis, around topics or challenges that you would like us to explore for a workshop or informal conversations.
Thank you, Alicia. Just to add to that, one of the, Manny, you were mentioning the now decade-old joint faculty agreement. And part of the reason we renewed this relationship a couple years back is we felt last time we did that, it was, here's the MOU now, good luck. And we both Prasant and, Horst Simon, who was Carol's predecessor, we decided to take a concerted effort to kind of nurture and help these relationships and be here to support, support these. And so it's been good. But to that point too, if there's other topics, if there's other just questions you have about research that's going on, reach out to me and I can see if I can find the right folks for you to connect with.
Okay, one last question, Manny.
I'm sorry, it's not a question, it's a follow-up comment, because I think what Carol said is so relevant in terms of emergence of remote instruction through the pandemic, because we've had 2 failed recruitments of joint appointments because the commute in the end was something of a problem about where will the faculty person live. Well, their lab will be at LBNL, so they live there probably. However, they could take care of their teaching through remote instruction, which is become quite common. So that's one hurdle that has been not removed completely, but made more manageable. I just
Yeah.
want to point that out.
Good point.
Any other questions or comments, suggestions? I just want to remind people, we have an email distribution list. I posted a link earlier in the chat, but maybe we can post it again. We don't spam you. We occasionally will send you an email around events like this one, relevant funding opportunities, or we were having up to a few months ago, we were having office hours, and we might revisit the idea of that. The office hours were just 1 hour a month where our team and Bill kind of host an open Zoom. And if you have any questions, you just come and ask your question. If we can answer on the spot, we do. And if we can't, we go and find information for you. So we've had people come to the office hours with questions around joint appointments, or who does my student have to talk to for an internship, or are we eligible for this funding opportunity, or help finding funding opportunities. So if you have any of those questions, feel free to send us a message. Feel free to join the email distribution list, the Simple SIMPA email list. And then we will let you know through that list when we have the next office hours for the partnership.
Well, thanks very much, everybody, for coming to hear the discussion. And like I said, I'm going to look forward to future engagements. Have a great weekend.
Thank
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.